has been a few days since the Horizons Conference 2021 ended, so I've had some time to sit with and process that. If you don't know what Horizons Conf is, it's the largest and longest running psychedelic conference in the world, set in New York City, which is convenient for me since I live here, but people travel from all over the world to come, so you can imagine it's kind of a big deal in the psychedelic space. In this video, I will recap my experience this year to give you a sense of what it's like to go to this conference, and also what the sentiments and concerns are at this point of the history of psychedelics. There were classes and shit going on from Wednesday to Friday, but I only went to the main conference at the Cooper Union on Saturday and Sunday. I woke up hella early at like 6:30 a.m. to get there by 8 a.m. You don't really have to get there that early, but I just wanted a good seat because in the Great Hall at Cooper Union, there are these pillars which are really good at blocking the view. So I checked in, got my badge, got my program booklet, got a free Dr. Bronner's hand sanitizer, headed down these like chess tiles that were kind of trippy. Then outside the Great Hall, there's like this hallway corridor area where booths are set up, like for Maps, Lucid News, Vine Ventures, where they hand out like pamphlets and they sell shit like shirts and books, which is where I got this shirt. Let's see. But inside the Great Hall is where I spent most of my time, just sitting there from about 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for those 2 days. Sometimes during the talks you could kind of hear chatter from the hallway where the booths were, and those were normally people who were already really entrenched in this psychedelic space, and they've been going to this conference for hella long, and they already know pretty much what the talks would go over, often to a much greater detail and extent than the talks themselves even go over. I am not at that level, so this was my second Horizons conference, the first being in 2019, so I just sat there and absorbed. So Saturday's theme was psychedelics in medicine, and Sunday's theme was psychedelics in the world. Not sure those themes were totally accurate, to be honest. I actually feel like those themes could be reversed. But really, it's sort of even hard to try to categorize these talks because each talk can be so interconnected with a lot of shit. So I'm not going to go over the bio of every person I mentioned here, but if you want, you can go look it up yourselves, and I'm sorry in advance if I mispronounce any names. On Saturday, we had a cool talk by Graham Petchnick about patents, and I already knew of some of the problems here in the patent space in psychedelics, but it was nice to go a bit more in depth. I learned some new stuff, and it was also nice to see that most of the speakers seemed to be on board with this kind of like anti-patent philosophy, and it seemed most of the attendants were as well based on when they would clap, but who knows, we might have just been the vocal majority there. Then we had Usona Institute give a talk. So if Compass was a non-profit, they would be kind of like Usona, and Usona is also very anti-patent, very into open science, and their main objective is healing and people, not profits. They seemed like really benevolent, kind people, but who knows, I could be wrong about that too. You never know with this stuff, honestly. Then Maps talked about their post-FDA approval plans, like how they were going to open up clinics and how they were going to get the drugs out to people. They were transitioning to a for-profit, public benefit company that puts people above profits. I mean, the sentiment is nice. I know that they need to make money, but I feel like at the same time, a for-profit company's main objective is to make profit. So I don't know, I guess we'll see how that goes. And yeah, Maps just got $70 million from Vine Ventures, which I had never heard of till like last week. This is not a donation, it's not an investment, so it's not totally clear to me what it is. I haven't looked into it yet. It is interesting seeing these new players and this new money coming into this space. It does seem like they are trying to find this balance between, well, we want to make a difference, we want to help people, but we also need to make money, but we don't want to put money first, so... Then we had Thomas Eckert, who was one of the leaders of Oregon's Measure 109, saying that the FDA approval process cannot be the only source of progress and that access shouldn't be restricted to the medical complex. And Selena Subaya reminded us that if we only focus on treatments, we are still sending people out in a world that needs to be healed. Overall, I like Nicole Howell's question of, are we trying to bring psychedelics to the mainstream, or are we trying to make the mainstream more psychedelic? With the answer being, of course, that we are trying to make the mainstream more psychedelic. But we were kind of like rushing, trying so hard to get these drugs FDA approved or decriminalized or legalized, and we're moving so fast, but are we really doing this the right way? Then there were discussions on the harmful sides to all this. One, Matthew Johnson said that the importance of the mystical experience is not necessary and is overstated when healing with psychedelics. I guess it depends on how you define mystical, but I guess for me, I feel like it's not important, but again, I'm not researching this stuff myself. Manoj Das also said how psychedelic experience could lead to a person believing in false memories, and it made me remember how the day I tripped after my uncle's death, I relived all these memories that I had with him that I was very certain those memories actually happened and I'd forgotten about them. And for me anyway, it was very therapeutic, although maybe those memories never actually happened in this reality. But there could also be cases where these false memories are problematic. Then what I think was the most poignant talk of Saturday was Laura Mae Northrup's talk on sexual abuse in psychedelic therapy. This is a big problem, not just in psychedelic therapy, but all kinds of therapy. And you can imagine it's especially problematic when the patient is under the influence of these very impressionable drugs. Laura Mae was saying that having sex with a client is always sexual abuse because of the power dynamic. And a lot of times the abuser has a lot of trauma themselves, so it's like this cycle of trauma and abuse. She also says that it does not matter how many high-dose trips you've had, if you haven't put in the work to heal yourself, how are you going to heal others? So that wrapped up Saturday. And then there were a number of after parties and events going on around the conference, and one of them I went to that Saturday night was a drinks happy hour thing by SSDP and Psychedelic Seminars. And in this after party and even at the conference, I met people who I hadn't seen since pre-pandemic, when I used to go to the psychedelic meetups in the New York area, and I met a lot of people for the first time in person who I had only talked to online, on Discord, and I even met a few of you, my subscribers. Even though I was nervous about socializing that weekend, it was definitely one of my favorite parts, meeting with, catching up, getting to know all these people. But yeah, y'all are amazing. I don't even know how some of you find my trip stories entertaining, because some of you have some really incredible, awesome, beautiful trip stories. I don't really have a lot of people in my real life I can connect to on this stuff, so it's really nice sometimes to speak with like-minded people, which I think is one of the benefits of going to conferences or meetups like this. I was so touched by some of your words, so thank you. But yeah, I didn't stay out too late because had to be back at Cooper Union on Sunday early morning. Sunday started with Caroline Dorsey saying that we need to shift from individualized healing to collective healing, and to define community in terms of access to clinical trials, psychedelic treatment, and criminal justice reform. And this was quoted twice that day, but none of us are free until all of us are. One of my favorite talks of the conference was by Leonard Pickard, who, if you don't know, allegedly made 90% of the world's LSD supply and was recently released from federal prison after like 2 life sentences without chance of parole and 20 years of maximum security environment. He shared poignant stories from prison, like people getting stabbed a week before they were going to be released for non-violent drug crimes, or how they would save food scraps for these ants that they could have treated like their pets. My description really isn't doing this justice, but it was just that mixture of humanity, desperation, and yet hope. He ended with the story of how someone accidentally dosed themselves with 10 million doses of acid, and his takeaway was that we already have that which we seek: ultimate intelligence, beauty, universal peace, the final comprehension, ultimate love. I felt so honored to be in his presence, and despite all the shit he went through, he still seemed to have this inner calm. I think pretty much everyone gave a standing ovation to this talk. Then Hamilton Morris touched a bit on the scalability problem with drugs. For instance, with LSD, it's really easy for one chemist to produce millions of doses, but then you have the problem of scalability in therapy because an LSD trip can be like 10 hours at least. Another funny thing I thought Hamilton Morris mentioned was how like 5-MeO-DMT is kind of like that dick measuring contest in psychedelics, you know? Like to show how serious you are about psychedelics. At first it used to be ayahuasca, but now it's 5-MeO, which I could totally see. Another interesting point was raised here about natural versus synthetic drugs and how just because it's natural doesn't necessarily mean it's better, which is also my view. But one thing to consider about natural drugs specifically was how we may end up exploiting nature with the excuse that it's better for us. I mean, definitely there's also something about consuming a plant, you know, that grew and had its own life, that has its own spirit, that may feel different, but that's more of a like spiritual viewpoint. Then we went into 2 drugs, which I myself am not super familiar with and don't know that much about, but one was iboga / ibogaine and the other was peyote / mescaline. So, for instance, with iboga, Richard Fowler described how we've extracted and reduced these indigenous medicines, and we set aside these ancient knowledge systems that have been there for so long in our Western modern societies. Now it's becoming harder to find iboga, and we need to figure out how to cultivate it in ways that are not harmful, but also give back to the people who told the world about all this information in the first place. This was quoted more than once in the conference as well, but 80% of the biodiversity in the world are directly managed by indigenous and local communities. Then Juliana Mulligan gave a very piercing talk, which was also one of my favorites of the conference. She shared her story, which feels too personal for me to reiterate here, but she highlighted a lot of issues in ibogaine treatment right now, such as death, abuse, and clinicians who are not properly trained. It's all unregulated. It's really easy to go open up your own clinic with a few $1,000s and then claim to be a healer and charge people hella money. And she said that we need to hold each other accountable, that we cannot build a safe space if community leaders are bullies, that psychological violence is still abuse, and how all these new investments and patents going into ibogaine are just another aspect of that violence. Like, that is not indigenous reciprocity. Like, the vast majority of people who have access to ibogaine treatments are white males from the US and Europe. So then you have indigenous medicine that you take from them that are used to help heal the most privileged people in the world. She said we also need to stop referring to this medicine as a cure, a solution, an answer, because people get their hopes up a lot, and then it's not like a magic pill. It doesn't automatically work, and then they get disappointed. Healing is a lifetime of work, and there are no quick fixes. So I didn't even touch on everything Juliana Mulligan went over, but those are like very, very important points. Then on the mescaline side, there was a lot of indigenous representation on this. One thing the host of this conference mentioned that I thought was important was how indigenous people are not products to be called up and flown in whenever it benefits other communities, and they get no benefits to their own communities themselves. Like, we just keep extracting knowledge and information from them, and we don't think about how we can also benefit them. Like, it's not a relationship, because, you know, Indigenous are really cautious about engaging with people outside their communities because in the past, they've been harmed because of it. And the main emphasis I got in this section of the conference was all about reciprocity. Troy, the last captive, said that life centers around reciprocity. And Miriam Volta said that we need to consult Indigenous communities and also to move at the speed of trust. Then there was a Q&A panel at the end with all of the speakers, and somebody asked Hamilton Morris about his involvement with Compass and their polymorph patents. And oh my god, I was cringing in my seat. That was awkward for me to watch. But if you didn't know, Hamilton Morris recently joined Compass to research new psychedelic compounds. I'm really glad this person asked this question, because I was wondering this when I heard the news, like, is Hamilton Morris trying to be like a inner moral compass for Compass, no pun intended, like make change from the inside kind of? And the answer appears to be he did not intend to, but may now feel pressured to. Like, he kept saying he's not involved in all that, he's just focused on his own research. But Troy, the last captive, was like, you have a platform and you have a relationship with Compass. What are you doing to hold Compass accountable? And after a whole conference where we discussed how to do that, Hamilton could not give a straight answer. So yeah, that was kind of a big oof. If you're interested in any of these talks, I think Horizons is going to release the live stream, or at least some of the talks on their YouTube channel at some point, so be on the lookout for that. Overall, my impression this year was that it was hella white. I guess it's not that surprising, but it's not just the speakers, but the attendees as well. And nothing against them, a lot of them are really lovely people. It's just that despite all these talks about how do we increase diversity and representation, it feels more like a white space for white people, and I look around and I definitely feel out of place. I actually feel like there were a good amount of women there though. I mean, we all seem to be aligned on the same stuff, right? So anti-patents, very wary about the corporatization and medicalization of psychedelics, with more emphasis on reciprocity. But, you know, in this whole psychedelic community, we are not all on the same page, and this is something I realized in Horizons 2019. Like, you think, oh yeah, we're all into psychedelics, like, we all want the same things, but we don't. At Horizons Conference, it does seem like we're on the same page, and it is important that we bring up and acknowledge these issues here. But it seems like no matter how much you talk about these things, investor money is still coming in and shit is still happening behind the scenes. Big takeaway for me was that there's still a lot of questions here and little answers, and we could talk, but can we walk the walk? And some are hopeful, others are not. It is to be determined, I guess. All I know is that for me, I'm fairly new to all of this, and there's still a lot I have to learn, and still a lot I don't know, so I don't know, but I will be watching. Thank you for listening to this recap, and I will see you next conference. I don't know if I'm going to the one next year in 2022, but probably at some point I will go again. See you guys, at least on YouTube. Alright, bye!